Well, welcome back to Unsolicited Conversations with J and B.
J and B.
All right, Brad. Well, I'm excited today to get started, and I just wanted to reintroduce, a little bit about what Unsolicited Conversations with J and B is all about. We are focusing on a variety of topics that are of interest to both of us and our backgrounds. We have a very unique background. I'm healthcare and have been in healthcare and the health sciences for a number of years. And Brad has been in business for years, but he's also got a background in healthcare as well as
just enough to be dangerous.
Yeah, exactly. So we came together and wanted to start a podcast that just focused on a variety of different topics that, again, are of interest to both of us, but are of interest to you guys. And some of them may be a little more controversial, and we may have a little bit of banter, but
Sure.
We're going to have fun. And the biggest thing is we may agree to disagree at times, but we are grown adults that will still have a mutual respect for one another.
Just as long as you agree that I'm right, Jodi.
No. Because I am the power of she.
All right.
So with that said, our topic today is definitely one that you wanted to focus on, Brad. It's a passion of yours, and it's about understanding the struggles of young men in today's society.
Yeah.
So what are some of the most significant challenges that young men are facing today, and how have these evolved over the past few decades?
It's kind of a loaded question. There's a lot there to unravel.
Yeah.
I think some of the biggest challenges young men face today is finding purpose in their lives. And what I mean by that is, why are young men struggling with purpose today and not in the past? Well, it's kind of been a cultural revolution in terms of women's movement, let's say, in the last 20 years, which has been very good.
Mm-hmm.
I should preface this talk by saying that I do have two daughters, okay? And that I am very much interested in women and women's opportunities. And I think it's fantastic to see the advancement that women have made. But I also get a little concerned about the crisis that young men face today. And it really shouldn't be a zero-sum game where girls and women advance in society today and the boys are left behind, young men are left behind.
Right.
So I think young men struggle with purpose. I'll just say that. Why? Once again, that's multifaceted, but I think it gets into a position where young men today don't understand where they fit.
Yep.
When you use the word, for example, masculinity, I am pretty comfortable with that in my generation. But if you ask a very young man today, let's say Generation Z, he may get a quite different answer. And so sometimes on the right, you're going to hear young men need to be more like their fathers. On the left, young men need to be more like their sisters. So I think young boys are men in a really precarious position in terms of, what do you want from me and what do I need to be and how do I do that? And the confusion has really resulted in so many young men bailing out for the workforce, for example. I didn't realize this, but pre-COVID, 9 million men bailed out of the workforce.
9 million?
9 million. Yeah. So,
wow.
Yeah, they're not.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, they're either not working at all, or they're home in their basement playing video games, or whatever the case may be. So you see a lot of lonely, discouraged young men struggling to find a way in society today.
Why is that? Is it the way they were raised, that they don't feel that they are upholding the expectations of their father? Because of the generation that we grew up in is definitely much different than the generation that kids are growing up in now. And we've had to evolve and change over time with society and with the workforce and with what is out there. But why do you think that 9 million men, a large sum of individuals that just left the in-person workforce focus right now?
Right. So let me just lay out the outcomes of this, and then we'll just maybe talk a little bit about the whys. And, I hear words like toxic masculinity. Yeah, in my mind, that's kind of an oxymoron. I mean, true masculinity is not toxic. People are toxic. Femininity can be toxic, quite frankly. But I think young men have been told that they're toxic. And I think that hurts. It hurts what masculinity looks like. And the outcome of this, if you take a look at it, for example, men are 3 times as likely to suffer from overdose. 80% of all suicides in America today are committed by men. Incarceration rates, primarily men, 14 times higher than women. Homelessness. Men are about, when you take a look at the homelessness percentage, men are about 60 to 65% versus women. When you look at being a man today, I mean, for example, more young men die in war. They work outside in hazardous jobs. They suffer from, like I said, debilitating issues mentally or whatever the case may be that have really kind of held them back. So in some regards, what I want to ask some of the women who still claim this is a patriarchal society, I want to ask, what's the benefit that men have today? Why is it so good to be a man? Because statistically, it's not that great. Let me give you another example, and then we'll move on. For every 100 young girls or girls that get 4-year degrees, 74 guys get it. Men have a higher dropout rate in college and in high school. Young women do better in college in their GPA than guys do.
Yep.
When you take a look at, for example, high school valedictorians, 70% of all high school valedictorians are girls. We have more girls that graduate from high school overall, 45,000 more than we do boys. So it's become very evident that in some regards, young men are being left behind. So historically, what have men provided for women? They provided the economic value. In other words, they provided protection and provision. Women needed men for protection and provision. What did we need a woman for? Well, most of it was for the emotional support, intimacy that a man doesn't typically get. And so when you see a man who now loses the intimate, and a woman can say, I don't need you for protection. Right. I don't need you for provision anymore. I don't need a man in my life. I don't need you at all. But the man still has what, and that's true in our society today. Right. But men still need connection. Men still need intimacy. And men still need to know that they're needed, and they need what women provide them. And so when a woman says, I don't see value in this relationship because I don't need you for what you've been good for historically, the problem is men are left stuck.
Yeah. I mean, men traditionally, or statistically, it's been shown that they don't have as many friends as women. They tend to, if you are getting a divorce and you've been in a male-female relationship, they tend to be the ones that do fall way behind and don't leave the couch. They have a harder time because they don't have the emotional support anymore from this female spouse. They don't have the friendships or the community that is needed to kind of go through that. Why is it that males, when they do become married, or even if they're in a relationship, that they tend to hone in just on that one relationship and don't foster the other relationships that they may have had before with their male friendships or even female friendships? I know you, Brad, you have a lot of friends, males and females, and you go out and you and Leah have a great, relationship internally and externally. But why are there some men, like, say, for instance, what if you'd ended up divorced? Would you curl up in a ball in a shell, or would you do you have that community of support that would be able to kind of bring you out of that?
Well, I think in my case, I would say, yes, I have the community of support. But for some reason, for example, let's go back and take a look. In the 1960s, 3% of men said that they have nobody to talk to, nobody to communicate with, nobody in their life. Today, it's as high as 15%, maybe greater. Wow. So loneliness is really a crisis in men today. The reason for that may be a term called alexithymia, where men are colorblind to some emotions at many times. Okay. In other words, when I'm growing up as a young man, let's just think about it, because I struggle with this sometimes myself. What's the most common emotion I experience? If, for example, I'm bullied in school, what do I feel?
Sad, lonely.
Well, I also feel anger.
Anger.
I'm pissed off. If, for example, I get rejected on a date from a girl, what do I feel?
Anger or sad.
Or sad. What happens when my team I'm on, we lose the national champion or lose a state championship in football? How do I feel?
Angry and sad.
So the most common, I think, emotion that men understand and feel growing up in our society today is anger.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we express ourselves too often. And that's where the term toxic masculinity comes from. But it's, in many regards, it's how men understood to process emotions and who they are.
Mm-hmm.
Women, on the other hand, are not colorblind to their emotions. You mentioned some right off the bat. How do I feel? Sad, disappointed, frustrated,
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a little angry, whatever the case may be. Men don't ferret through all those emotions. We just fucking feel pissed off.
Mm-hmm. And that's more testosterone,
And that's
more natural aggressiveness.
Right. And that's kind of come from more
biology.
But in having that though, Jodi, which everything is, I look at men and women as a good and a bad. There's good things about men and masculinity and some negative things. There's good things about femininity, good and bad.
Yeah.
So when men don't have the ability to have, let's say, if they're colorblind to emotions and the only one they can really know and they don't self-regulate well is anger. How do they process and bond with other men and women? How do they go out and have adversity and still have a lot of people in their lives? They're able to overcome this. Now, some men do it beautifully. I'm not saying this is more the 80-20 rule. Can do it beautifully. But many men struggle to find connection and to find friends and people they can process life through. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think, too, it's all a matter of role modeling as what we see in our childhood. Is also kind of how we deliver, I guess, ourselves in adulthood a lot of times. Not always. Sometimes there are some external circumstances, that divorce maybe in middle school of that child or a single parent or whatever. There are a lot of different circumstances there. But a lot of that emotion and talking about it comes from role modeling from our parents too. And if our parents didn't do a great job of it, we may not be able to talk about it either or address our emotions or understand what we're feeling.
Right. And it's look back not that far. I mean, we just got historical. We've come a long way in the last few generations, let's be honest. But in some ways, we still battle it. For example, Jodi, when I was a kid, I didn't cry in front of my dad. Mm-hmm. Men don't cry, right? And I would be told, you got to pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Mm-hmm. You got to get going. And this is kind of what men were taught. And, this is how we process things. Mm-hmm. Quite different than girls and women along the way. Mm-hmm. But in this, we're taught to suppress our emotions, to keep them stuffed down somewhere. But you suppress your emotions.
You suppress your emotions.
And you bury it. And it takes a lot of work in some cases to be able to uncover a lot of what you actually feel and think.
Mm-hmm. It's just life is hard, and channeling emotions and
in a positive way.
In a positive way.
And I think this needs to be pointed out. I think relationships are different amongst boys, girls, young men and women today than they were in my generation. There's such thing as hypergamy. And I think we talked about this a little bit before, Jodi. Mm-hmm. Some people call it, sexual market value. But typically today, you're going to see young women who want to marry or be with a male, typically of their same education level, income potential, and all that. And they're not willing to date men that they don't perceive to be at that same level. Men, on the other hand, are more flexible, Jodi. Mm-hmm. So it's not uncommon to see a Jeff Bezos dating somebody who maybe worked at Amazon and not the C-suite.
Exactly.
Another position. Exactly. That's not uncommon. The number of incels, which is involuntary celibate men, is actually increasing. It's beginning. They have support groups for it. They can't find girls because you have women, young girls today, only want the top 10% of men.
And high caliber. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of them will say what that means. They mean 666, which is they want to be at least 6 foot tall, a six pack, and make at least 6 digits in income, right? Yeah. So, but that's not the majority. Great. I mean, the average height of a male today is 5'9" in the U.S. Yeah. That's the average height. The average income is $40,100 for men today in society. And, we've got 75% of our society, 20 years and older, that's either obese or overweight. I mean, finding that guy, no matter if you're a woman, if you're a top 10%er, it's a good day for you. Mm-hmm. But if you're not, you're finding many men are struggling with the dating scene.
Yes.
And finding girls, women who want to go out with him because these women do not perceive them as being a 666 guy.
To me, that would motivate me, right? Like as a female, or just who I am innately. I'm a driven individual. Like, and if you challenge me, I will take that challenge on to the best of my ability.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it that if men who are struggling right now, and they know these statistics, because you see it quite a bit. And I actually had this conversation with a couple girlfriends the other night, and they're who are single and, you know, well educated. One's an engineer who's actually in, you know, a career path that was predominant men are males years ago, and now is males and females. I think she said her workforce is pretty split when it comes to males and females.
And that's not uncommon today.
Yeah.
So.
And she was like, yeah, I want somebody who is as educated as me. And I want them to be as active as what I am, because I'm active. And if I'm putting in the work, why aren't they putting in the work? So why doesn't that motivate the young male that is like, man, I can't get a girlfriend. No, but these females don't know what they want anymore. And so I'm just going to stay in the house and do nothing. And to me, as a female, and I know a lot of the people that I am around, obviously we're like-minded. They would be motivated if they were single. Why are the males not motivated to then go to school or, you know, get that job? Because even the vocational positions, like an electrician or somebody who pours concrete, they make 6 figures. But yeah, may not have a 4-year degree or even a 6-year degree, but they make a lot of money. So, but if they're not out there doing that, like, why are they not motivated?
Well, I think some men have just lost hope. You know, take a look at the reasons why men commit suicide. There was an Australian study that looked at this. And in the suicide letters, whether they committed suicide or not, there were 2 words. They were hopeless. They felt hopeless and they felt useless. The outpouring of what you should be doing and what you're not doing. Many men, going back to resiliency, don't have some of that. Well, and also you look at the numbers. Let's take a college educated, because let's say, for example, it's going to get worse. What I mean by that is if you have twice as many women getting college degrees as men, and twice as many women looking at hypergamy as I'm only dating a man who's educated, you've got less and less men in the workforce that are educated because women are occupying more of the educational position spots. Right. So I think, you know, and to some regards, and I will say this, and I hope I don't offend too many females, but sometimes a woman their standards are a little bit unrealistic. I mean, when your BMI is 30, right? You know, and you're a waitress, I'm sorry, but to think that you're going to get some hunk of some Chad, I guess they call him today, you're just not going to fucking happen. Do you follow what I'm saying? Yeah, no. So I think some of it, maybe the resiliency of men. I'm going to attest to that. But I also think that women have some.
We have to do our part.
You have some ownership in this too, in regard that what you want, honey, look at yourself. You know, that's not what you're going to get either.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I don't disagree with that statement, Brad. I mean, I'm all for female empowerment, but I also am like, well, you have to take care of yourself if you want this type of individual. Right. Shouldn't you present yourself as that individual as well?
Absolutely. Yes. No, absolutely.
So, and so in regards to relationships, how do you think the evolving gender roles and dynamics in relationships are affecting young men's ability to form connections or maintain like their healthy relationships? We've talked a little bit about this, but I kind of wanted to go back to our conversation earlier about fathers in the home. Okay. I am all for, you know, same-sex marriages. I don't really care because you do you. But I do see the value of having a male role model and a female role model in an individual's life. I think it's very, very important. I lost my dad at a very young age. Can't even imagine my daughter growing up that way. And I find value in the things that he taught me and did compared to what my mom taught me. And so if we have the same-sex, marriages with children, females or males, I don't care. I think that you need to have both. Where did the big brother, big sister programs come from? If those kids need that additional kind of insight, because they need an understanding. Because obviously if you have two females, generally they're a little bit more on the feminist side, and they don't particularly care for the male. They do though, because they tend to have male sons, and they want them to be well-rounded individuals, or at least a lot of my friends.
Or do they want them to be more feminine?
Well, I mean, I've seen both ways. What does that dynamic look like?
It's you know what, you and I are going to differ on this a little bit. I'm not really a proponent of same-sex marriage for two females. Here's why, from my perspective as a guy. Yeah, I could go back to my upbringing. I get that. And I have my own conscious and subconscious biases. I get that too. However, when I look back on my life, Jodi, who made a difference in my life? Who was the one or two women or men who steered the course of where I go in my life, who kind of corrected the ship at times? Mm-hmm. It was Lieutenant Colonel Beeler, without a doubt. Mm-hmm. And it was my basketball coach. Mm-hmm. So without those men in my life speaking into me, man to man, mm-hmm. I'm not sure may not accomplish what I've been able to. They had that big of influence on me. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, Jodi, but I wouldn't have got that same degree of influence from a woman. It just did not mean the same. When I role modeled myself after Lieutenant Colonel Beeler as a loving husband, a loving father, a great man, a great leader, and a great soldier, mm-hmm. that's what I saw, and that's what was modeled for me. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, when we talk about this and role models, which are important, especially the Big Brother programs, mm-hmm. young men need to be modeled what men should look like. And I don't know that having women model for young boys is really the way society should go. I don't know that I would have benefited that tremendously mm-hmm. myself. So that's my opinion on that.
But you also, I mean, and this is where we may disagree a little bit. You think men should look a certain way.
Well,
Tell me what you think, what you mean by that.
Well, I think, I still believe in masculinity. Here's the thing. Let's take a look at masculinity and the positive it brings, because I do believe in masculinity as much as I believe in femininity. Mm-hmm. And I love feminine women. I love and you can be a woman and have masculine traits. Mm-hmm. I'm okay with that's fine. And you can be a male and have some feminine traits. But I think ultimately masculinity is about duty, honor. Mm-hmm. It's about doing the right thing. It's about, at times, understanding when it's time to unsheath the sword and when it's not, mm-hmm. and understand the difference in that. When aggression can be in the right place, mm-hmm. it can be good. And if a woman out there says it's never good, they're absolutely fucking wrong. This country would not be here today if it wasn't for aggressive men, then the warrior spirit. I'm mm-hmm. sorry, ladies, but that's just the way it is. Mm-hmm. But can aggressiveness be toxic? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. It can be toxic, but used in the right. So if you have a masculine man who can show you how to use it in the right way, mm-hmm. and how to can love in the right way, I believe it takes a man to teach another boy or young man how to do this the correct way, the loving way, to honor women and honor femininity.
I would challenge you a little bit.
Sure, please do.
On that, because I feel like as a female, I have definite feminine traits, but okay. I also have masculine traits. When mm-hmm. you say to uphold honor and do the right thing mm-hmm. and know when to pull the sheath, mm-hmm. I feel like I can do that.
Great.
At 100%.
Sure.
Do I feel like if you have same-sex marriage, or like two females, could they do that? I don't know. All of us have different personalities. Right. All of us have different upbringings. Right. So yeah, if we're going to look at the majority, when we think of like manliness, mm-hmm. We think of, they're strong, they're courageous, mm-hmm. they're aggressive, and mm-hmm. they do know when to, throw the first punch, which I've been known to throw a few punches in my time.
I don't doubt that.
I would definitely say that I probably am a little bit more masculine. So that's where I would challenge you, in that there are some females that are able to do that. But statistically, if we were to look at it, there's more manly men out there. I think we need both roles. No matter what, we need a male and a female. If same-sex marriage, I don't really care, but then finding that person, allowing that child to develop the way they should develop, be secure in their own body and not try to push them like, oh, I want you to be more feminine because you're being raised by two females. Or, my nephews who are married, if they adopt or if they have a girl child, a female child or a male child, I want them to allow that child to develop exactly as they should, just on their own. Don't try to push them towards one way or the other. Like, I think that is where I come from, is kind of, you allow your child to develop and love how they want to love, and know who they are from the beginning, and don't push aside feelings. If my son is more feminine, because he is a very empathetic little boy, he has been through a lot in his life, and so he is more empathetic, but he also he's very much boy, and so he's gonna, he has my husband, but he also has me to like talk to him about those scenarios of when to be masculine and how to treat a female, and how to treat other boys too. So
right.
That's kind of where I come from. I'm like, I'm open-minded to absolutely everything. And I think that it takes a good balance of open communication. And we've talked about that through every podcast, and communication when it comes to our attachment styles podcast, our sleep podcast. And it really comes down to knowing who you are as an individual, loving who you are, and communicating. And being open-minded, not judging right away.
Sure.
And I know sometimes it's hard because we were raised in a much different time than what my kids are being raised in now. And it's something that I have to...
To that point, exactly. I think that's some of the reasons why men struggle.
Absolutely.
They're kind of caught in the in-between. Well, a couple things you said real quick. First of all, I think you are a little bit of an anomaly. Honestly, Jodi. I mean, I worked out with you in the gym. You can probably kick my ass. You still have a femininity about you that's wonderful. So you have some of the characteristics of masculine and feminine, and I think that's great. And that's a beautiful thing. I think we need to celebrate both. Now, honestly, Jodi, I'll be honest with you, and I never thought this 30 years ago, but if my son he's not, but if he was happened to be gay, I would still love him no matter what, gay or not, as a young man. Would that necessarily be my preference? No, because I would like for him to have me as a role model and to show him what a woman means in his life, and what a woman should be treated and how she should be treated and what you should do for women. I'm still old. I still got enough, I guess, I still open the door for women.
Chivalry.
I still have enough chivalry within me that I was taught from my father that I don't want to see that die. I think we should honor femininity in that way. But to say that, for example, that a woman can have some masculine traits in her, I don't have an issue with that. Just like I don't have some of the greatest, take a look at this, Jodi, some of the greatest artists from even architecture and design, some of the most beautiful things that have ever been created in world history were created by men who were gay. Yeah. So I'm not here to say, and I'm not here to say that being gay is a bad thing. I'm just saying I can tell you what I know and what meant meaningful in my life and what helped me along the way. Young men have to sit down on a piece of paper and say, what does society tell me to do? And what do I want to do? And then pursue that. If that means that you want to be a mechanic, by God, be a mechanic. If that means you want to work in a boutique store, then go work in a boutique store.
Exactly. Yeah. My brother-in-law, his son, I remember when he came out to him, and he was devastated. So it was hard, and it's taken a lot for both of them to learn how to love and communicate again. Because my brother-in-law was similar to you, and
is that a bad thing?
No, it's not a bad thing at all. It's just we're human, and we were all raised a different way. And life experience tends to change how we think sometimes too. I know that I probably had some very strong beliefs and convictions when I was younger, but then I had to open my eyes and doors a little bit to understand, because I genuinely love people. I love humans, and I love engaging with them. I mean, that's, I think, one reason why we started this. We both we love to connect with people.
Right.
And like we said earlier, we can agree to disagree, and we are still going to have a mutual respect and be able to walk out this door and still go to dinner together and not hate one another or dislike one another in any way or badmouth one another in it. And I think ultimately that's what we want everybody to do. Right. Because what my way is not always the right way. My thought process is not always the right way. And we all have to be very open-minded about.
Well, I think, so let's talk real quick, if you don't mind, about what do we think is going to help, let's say, address the issue?
Yeah.
I think there's a couple things from my perspective. Is number one, we have to get more men involved in young men's lives in some way, shape, or form. I would love to see young men, like I said, that we come in as men and talk to young men about what it means to be, in my case, what it means to be a man, what it means, your role in society. I don't think we have enough of that. And then getting young men back on track, and it's easy for them to get, there was an African saying that I heard many years ago, something like this: young men will start the village aflame or on fire just to watch it burn or feel the warmth. And my point on that is that sometimes when young men don't have direction and don't have a purpose, where do they go? Right. It's delinquency. It's things that really shouldn't be done. And we've got to channel more young men into the good things that life can do and what they can come about and be within themselves. Because I look at men like this. Some of the things when you take a look at the Familia Sagrada in Spain and in the Gaudi work, when you take a look at the pyramids, when you take a look at the Sistine Chapel, it's, oh my God. I mean, it's just
beautiful.
But they were done by men. Not that women couldn't, I'm not saying that, but they were done by men. So men have the ability to do some of the most beautiful works ever known to mankind. But men also harbor demons, and they can be the most fucking destructive creatures ever known to mankind. We can't allow men. So women who say, well, what do I give a shit? These men need to figure out themselves. They need to do it themselves. I'm telling you, ladies, we got to figure this out as a society. Yeah. Because if young men and the demon comes out of young men, what do you see?
We're going to see more destruction.
Well, just what we saw at, for example, the Trump Tower. We saw just this last weekend in New Orleans. We see some of the destructive behavior of men that are coming out. We have to help channel and focus men in the right direction, doing the right things, and for a purpose in their lives. Otherwise, you're going to see the fucking demon come out.
And we got to start younger. We can't start when by the time kids are 11, 12, 14, in those age groups, we're seeing some of that come out already, and self-destruction. So and
that's why we need more men to that point. We need more men in primary school. When you take a look at primary and secondary schools, 70, 80% of them are women.
Yeah. My husband is an educator.
Right.
And we've had multiple conversations about education, and we're going to go back a little bit to precision medicine and education. And then maybe are we sending kids to school, especially boys? Should we be sending them to school a little bit later? Would we see maybe a difference in their behaviors if they went to school at a little bit older
It's a great idea. We've talked about that. That's been brought up before. It's a great idea.
Right. And, we've talked about changing the schedule for schools as well to kind of go along with that circadian clock that as kids grow. So maybe starting high school a little bit later during the day, because they naturally end up staying up a little bit later because they have homework, and then they need to sleep in a little bit later. So that goes along with how kids process and deal with anxiety and depression, because we know that they need to sleep, and they need to sleep more. And kind of changing the way the 24/7 society works. We have to start, I think, much younger and in the education system.
To your point, which I think is a great one, and it's been addressed before, when we look at the prefrontal lobe in males versus females, where young boys are about 2 to 2.5 years behind. So typically, if you're a young woman and you're 20 years old, you're probably dating an 18-year-old mentally. Yeah. Or I should say emotionally, in terms of emotional regulations. So would we be better off having, number one, boys start school a year later? I agree with that. And number two, I can speak to this personally after spending time in the military, that many young boys especially would benefit from military time. I saw so many young soldiers come in at 18 with no direction, insubordinate, no respect.
Yeah.
They struggled with life, honestly. And after the drill sergeant got a hold of them and kind of straightened them out, and after their time in the military and the discipline structure and what they needed in their lives, which was many times a purpose and structure, the difference between that 18-year-old and the 21 or 22-year-old who got out of the military was like two different men. Amazing. So I think for some, I'm not saying for all young men, but for some young men, this is a great route to go and potentially to help them get where they need to be, to find purpose and structure. Furthermore, by the time they're out of the military, maybe a 2-year stint, possibly, they're probably, and they want to enter college, they're probably at the equivalent emotionally to where the girls are.
Exactly.
And so maybe the graduation rates might be higher. Maybe boys might do better in that case, because it's not a question of intelligence.
Right.
When you look at IQ levels, men and women are equivalent.
Yeah.
So it's not IQ, it's more about emotional development.
Absolutely. We see more people struggle with mental, emotional health. And is it because they are just not confident in who they are? And they never were given that opportunity growing up because maybe they didn't have a father, or they didn't have a mother, or they didn't have both parents. They had a single parent, and the single parent was working all the time because you have to support your one child. There's a lot of things factored into how people respond emotionally and mentally.
And I think men struggle with that big time. One of the things that you mentioned, I'll just kind of caveat on. You talked about fathers in the home. I mean, the studies now have just come out, the research has been done, which is very clear. Boys do not do well without father in the home. I mean, when you take a look at the number of kids, boys who go on to graduate, go on to college and graduate, who have professions, who are not incarcerated, who don't get in trouble with school, don't get in trouble with the law, who become productive members of society. The reality is that boys, more so than girls, not sure why yet, more so than girls, really, really benefit from having a father in the home. And when you take a look at statistically, 1 out of 4 families now have no father in the home. And those numbers are getting worse to some degree. And there's some communities like the Black community, it's even worse than that. So what we need to have happen, honestly, is fathers taking ownership for their sons and daughters and making sure they have a presence in their lives. It's really, really crucial and beneficial for boys especially.
Going back to the different types of jobs, the vocational jobs, and encouraging them that it's not all about always going to college and getting that 4-year degree or that, master's degree and being in the C-suite. Every position in life is important. And I have grown out of every position that I've held, and held some unique ones. And it's paid the bills. And that's really what we need to have happening is people working and paying the bills. And just because you have a 4-year degree doesn't mean that you are meant to be in the C-suite. And if you need a job so that you're not living off of food stamps, or you're not living off of, your unemployment, you can go take that job as a barista or somewhere. Like, I feel like you should just work.
Also, I would say when owned a company, it was predominantly female. And by the way, I found that in the jobs that they did at our company, in a way, having a college education did not mean diddly squat. In other words, you could have a college education, you're still a fucking deadbeat. Or you could not and be exceptional. So the point I'm making is that people who think that college education means that you're smart, it means that you're well equipped, it means that you can work hard and you can do the things and you have perseverance and stamina and you've got all the things to be successful, that is absolutely not true.
Right.
What is true is self-identity, what you want to do, what you want to be, and how you want to get there. Some jobs require a college degree, and if you want to do it, then go to college. Some jobs don't, then don't. But if you're going to go to college, my recommendation to a young man would be think about what you're doing in the discipline you're invest in, because college is not cheap and it's getting more and more expensive.
Right.
You could easily invest $200,000 in your undergrad degree that gets you nowhere close to where you want to be and what you want to do. So think twice before college and think more heavily about what discipline you want to get involved in and how you want to do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think there needs to be kind of a resurgent on the importance of vocational trade.
Yes.
I think we've discussed this before, but when I watched this house get constructed and I watched all the trades in and out of here, dozens of them, by the way, I never saw one female the entire time. Not that women can't do it. I'm not saying that, Jodi.
Right.
I'm just saying I didn't.
We know we can't.
I'm just saying, yeah.
But you didn't see it.
You didn't. It didn't
it's
occur.
Not a common.
So to your point, we need to give more accreditation, more credence to the trades, whether you're a framer, finished carpenter, you lay carpet, electrician, plumber, landscaper, concrete work, tile, whether you're on the roof, whatever the case may be, these men, whether you like to hear this or not, Jodi, we can talk about this. These type of men who construct roads, bring infrastructure together, build homes, build commercial buildings, they really are the backbone of what keeps our society function. And my point on this is, and not that men are better, let's stop that. It's that we need to give credence where credence is due. And I think some of these young men have never heard a thank you, a good job, appreciation, or we value what you do in society. And many men, I think that hurts young men.
Absolutely. I mean, my sister is, she went to college right away out of high school. And at that time, my dad was still alive. And so and college is expensive, but she was able to get more grant money and scholarships, but she had no idea what she wanted to do. And she literally kind of pissed away 2 years of college that ended up kind of not really getting paid for completely, but she had more money than what I had when I went to college. And I was like, man, and she even says, if I could go back and do it again, I would have. And she did. She stopped after 2 years. She started working. So I think sometimes it takes, it's trial and error a little bit, and we all make mistakes. But I think making sure that we know our kids and not pushing them into something like college if it's not meant for them right away, right out of high school. If it means they still live in our basement, but they have to be working. Like, you're not going to live in my basement and not be working. I mean, I have a 26-year-old that lives in my basement right now. And, one of the rules is like, you're going to college because that's what you want to do. And then he's like, well, maybe I shouldn't take this class. I'm like, no, you're going because this is what you were driven to do and you have to work. And, so I think just making sure that you know your kid and whatever choice that they decide, and if it's not college, that you support them. Because if they know themselves and they're like, you know what, I want to go into the military, support that.
Right. So I'm, one of the things I'd like maybe to ask you, when we take a look at family roles, it's pretty evident that, as men struggle, families struggle. I mean, that's kind of known. So from a female perspective, what do you think that females, if anything at all, what can be done or what should be done to help young men who struggle?
I think that by reviewing for this and kind of seeing what was out there, because you have to admit things that you're not following routinely, you don't really pay attention to. So right. I knew the statistics about male suicide and the opioid addiction, obviously being the field that I'm in, but I didn't realize the severity of young men just kind of failing to launch. And so this really did open up my eyes. And I think it just comes down to like, do we have to create policy around this? Potentially. There may be the need for policy, not just for young men. I think it may be just for like starting things off at a younger age, like looking at the education system when it comes to young boys and when they go to school, and just being very cognizant of all the stuff that's going on.
What about bringing vocational programs back into high school?
And absolutely bringing vocational programs back into the high school. I think it's starting. It is there. So I know that right now, one of my friends her son is going to be graduating this year. He's going to be graduating. He'll be a firefighter. So that to me is pretty impressive. I'm like, you're going to be leaving. When I left high school, I was a CNA. And so I was like, oh, I have a pretty good career. I already am able to make money. I can work full time, go to school full time. So definitely bringing some of those trainings back into the high school is beneficial to kids for sure.
I'm still a strong believer, and I always will be, in equal opportunity. I want my girls to have the same opportunity as my son does across the board. I truly do want that, but I don't want, in this case, I don't want to see boys and my son being left behind. It's not, as like I said, it's not a zero-sum game, and we have to figure out how to get young men engaged and involved, finding really who they are, what they are, and kind of find out their purpose in life. And I think we've kind of left them in limbo a little bit because they don't, once again, they're not sure where they belong. Do I belong? Do I follow in my dad's footsteps, or am I supposed to act a little bit more like my sister?
Yeah.
And I think that's a struggle mentally for men to figure out where to go next.
Agree. And I think maybe, the more and more information that's out there, hopefully people are listening to our podcast and you have that conversation with your son or your daughter. I mean, just anybody, your kids. I mean, I'm constantly, when my daughter's friends are over, when my son's friends are over, being involved and just asking them about life in general, like your day of school and what things like, make you tick. I think that those are conversations that you have all the time. Those are things that I didn't really grow up with. As I started working in the hospital and I was surrounded by, the docs on call and the nurses, those are the questions that they started asking me. It wasn't necessarily conversations at home, but I was a little bit different because my dad was sick when I was younger. So I've tried to focus on, just having those conversations with your kids, because sometimes you just get in the day-to-day of both of us work and the kids are at school, and then you don't even ask them about stuff. So starting the conversations now, creating awareness and an understanding of that this is out there. This is happening, and it is. We're seeing more and more of it, and this, the anxiety and depression. Here are some reasons why. We've talked about that, and how do we help improve it? Hopefully, we're creating some awareness around that.
If I had an opportunity to speak to a group of young men today, there's three things I'd probably say to them. Probably first and foremost, we kind of address this, as I would say, find out what your limiting factor is in terms of what's consuming your time. What's a consumption behavior? Now, addiction's on a spectrum. It may not be addiction, but what's consuming way too much of what you do in your life? Is it scrolling through social media, pornography we talked about, gaming, all the things? Yeah. What is it exactly that you spend an inordinate amount of time on? And then I would tell them, do your best with some support of friends to eliminate that from your life, and at least do it for 30 days. And if they did that, I promise you will feel better, because you will help self-regulate your neurohormonal system, and you will feel, I think you'll feel more productive. You'll feel better about yourself. The second thing I would say is ask for help.
Absolutely. And don't be ashamed.
Yeah, don't be ashamed, and reach out and ask for help when you're struggling. And the third thing I'd say, which men typically aren't very good at, is find some friends. See if you can network. See if you can get into a relationship with a couple other buddies where you grab some beer, you're vulnerable, you're able to talk about some things that are going on in your life. I think once we start to do three of those things, at least those three to start out with, and men can get in a better place mentally with themselves, I think the failure to launch will actually turn into a trajectory that society needs and wants to see.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Community is important, and I think that we all need it, males and females, but those three things are of utmost importance, I think.
I agree. I agree. Always a pleasure with you, Jodi. You know that.
Right, thank you. This was great. I think that we had fun.
Oh, yeah. And it's great topics.
You know what? Well, our next topic is going to be even better.
Absolutely. So if you liked what you saw today, please subscribe and comment. We'd love to hear from you and hear more content you'd love to see from us, but keep us relevant and active by, like I said, subscribe and comment for us. We do appreciate it.
And
thank you very much.
And share with all of your friends.
Yeah. And I hope you enjoyed the session. Thanks.